Hey guys, welcome back to I'm an Actor, Not a Therapist. I'm Sammy. So, what's going on? So, I apologize for not being here last week. It's the first episode I've missed. I was so upset with myself. But we're back this week, and thank you so much for all of your well wishes and patience and messages that I got saying, it's okay, take your time. That really does make what I do easier to know that you guys are behind me, whether I put an episode out every week or I miss a week. And with last week having been the first time I've ever missed an episode, um, I was very happy to see that y'all were okay with that. So thank you so, so much. With that being said, um, here's why I missed last week. And here's what I wanted to kind of talk about today is this thought process of healing, right? Like we've talked about this before. Nobody tells you that healing hurts and the things that go along with, being in the process of healing from a traumatic event or from some sort of something in your life, right? We've had this conversation, we've had this talk before. But what we didn't touch on, at least not, really have a deep, more meaningful conversation about, is this thought process of healing isn't linear. It's not. You're going to get a little bit better every day, but it's not a linear process. There's no one way to do it. And you will backslide. You will absolutely backslide. In fact, there was a recent situation that I wasn't necessarily a part of, but watched kind of happen. And I literally messaged a friend and I said, my inner punk wants to come out so bad right now, but I'm not going to let it. And when I say inner punk, I should probably explain this because this is not a concept that I talk about a lot, about, because I really do try to keep that voice at bay. Is, like if you're in a traumatic situation, like you're being bullied or, something along those lines, especially if it's something that happens over a period of time, at some point you're going to snap. Like at some point it's going to happen. It's just human nature, no matter how hard you try. And when I was growing up and I was in high school, especially, I gave not 0 thought about someone's feelings if they were attacking me. If I felt like if my fight or flight kicked in, the word fight was always the one I heard first. So I would say awful, mean, unedited things to people, to their faces, because I would never physically hurt somebody ever. To this day, I've never been pushed that far. Not that I'm looking to be very, very clear. Not that I'm ever looking to be. But that's a story for another day. But it was my defense system against the people that I was surrounded by. And these were not friends. These were just people that I saw on a daily basis whose main objective in their life was to see how far they could push me. Bullies at their finest, right? And I developed what I now call my inner punk, who did not care about people's feelings, who would verbally tear into people. And these would not be things that I could control. These would be blackout rages that I would just say horrible, horrible things to people. And then later on, my best friend, who still to this day loves me, would sit me down later and go, "Do you remember what you said?" And I'd go, "No." And she would have to either sit and remind me what I said, Or to this day, there have been things that I said to people while I was, you know, growing up and when I was a teenager, that to this day she remembers and I don't. And she won't tell me. To this day, she won't tell me what the hell I ever said to people sometimes. Because if I were pushed to that point, it was because I felt completely cornered. Now, I call her my inner punk. And it has taken me years. It's taken me probably a decade and a half to not only learn to control her, but how to keep her quiet. I redirect her in certain other ways now, especially because I'm in therapy. I've learned that voice, that inner punk, was a defense mechanism when I felt cornered. And that's not the person that I am. It's not even really the person that I was. It was just a coping mechanism for the situation that I was in at the time that I was using it. Is it a good coping mechanism? Was it a good coping mechanism? No, it was awful. I said some absolutely horrible, horrible things to people, apparently. And again, to this day, I don't remember half of what I said. Because, again, blackout rage is a thing. But again, very clear, I was never physically violent towards anybody, just verbally. And I never threatened anybody. Like, it never got that far. Like, to be very, very clear, it was never a physical fight. It was never a physical attack. It was never a verbal attack that promised a physical attack or anything like that. It was just mean, hateful words towards people. But being the age that I am now and having a more supportive circle around me now is making that inner punk smaller and smaller. And that voice gets quieter and quieter every time I talk to a very supportive member of my inner circle. But it took me decades to get to this point. So now, when I feel like I've seen an injustice or I feel attacked, verbally attacked, when I feel verbally attacked, when I am like kind of itching for that fight, I have to remind myself, like, you don't like that person that you were. You fought for years to not be that person anymore. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to go back to that. And I had to physically sit myself down, take a breath, and go, why is she hanging out with us right now? What does the inner punk want? And I have to really sit and think through what my inner punk response wants to be. And then I look at the response and I go, but that's not productive. That's not productive. It's not even going to make you feel better at this point. It's just going to come off as mean. And that's not who you are. And that's not what you're about. But it doesn't mean that I don't still some days have to take that step back and have to remind myself that I'm not that person anymore. I don't need that inner punk anymore, because I have people in my life that genuinely love me, that even though we're not in the same physical space, I know that they're just a message away, a phone call away, a video chat away, and it will bring me back to center where I belong. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not me denying my anger at all. I'm denial of anger sometimes anyway, but that's not what this is. This is my healing journey in not letting that quick inner voice, inner punk come out to play. Because I know from where I'm sitting right now in my healing journey, I know that if I ever let her come back out, I would ruin friendships. I would ruin the way people see me. Because she is not a good person. She wasn't then. She would be worse now. And I try and it's not an everyday thing that I have to keep her quiet. Generally, she's all right. But there have been times where I've had to remind myself how far I've come and that I don't need her anymore. And that she can go and sit down in the corners of my brain and hang out there. And that I don't need her as a coping mechanism anymore. And it's one of those things where, again, I have to take a breath and remind myself she's not needed. But that's part of the healing journey for me, is sitting and analyzing a situation before I respond and not just letting my inner punk come out and let myself dig myself a hole, essentially, And there have been times recently, especially with, a couple of events that I have seen over the past couple of days, where I've had to really hold myself back and not participate in something because I know that it won't end well for me or anybody else that would be involved in it. And, like I've said, healing is not linear. I could, there are times that I see something that in a different time, as a different person, I would have let my inner punk come out and fly, because that's just what I did. That was how I protected myself. That's how I protected those around me. And, I'm sorry, my train of thought kind of derailed for a second. But that's how I protected myself. That's how I protected those around me, was to unleash on people that I felt deserved it. And I've since learned to control that voice, to sit the voice down and to walk through it quietly. Because, like I said, nothing good comes out of that voice. Nothing good comes out of my snap reactions. Nothing good happens if the inner punk comes out to play. So I don't let that come out to play. And I'm very cautious about it, and I'm very calculated about it, especially on days that I want to unleash. Those are the times that I really have to take that breath and remind myself, like, hey, this is not worth it. This fight that you're about to get into, not worth it, my girl. Not worth it. You don't want to lose people. You don't really mean the things that you're thinking right now that you want to say to this situation. You don't want it. You want to walk away from it. Walk away from it, take a breath, think it through, and either come up with a mature response to it that's constructive, that can, be used as a teaching moment or a conversation instead of an attack, or walk away from it entirely and go talk to a friend, or go take a drive, or go have another cup of coffee. But you don't want this fight that you're staring at right now. ready to completely decimate somebody verbally. You don't want this. You want to walk away from this. And 10 times out of 10, today, I go, you're right. I don't want this fight. It's not worth it to me. It's not worth it to me. Could I have the fight? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I could. Could I win the verbal fight? Oh, I could. Oh, I absolutely could. But is the fight worth it? No. No. The fight's not worth it. Losing my friends because I completely unleashed, completely uncensored, in a moment of absolute you backed me against the wall kind of fight. No. It's not worth it. It's not. And some days it's a struggle to not fall back into those habits, to not go back to that person. It's a real struggle sometimes. And it's part of the healing process to be mature enough and responsible enough to have that conversation with myself of, you don't want this fight as much as you think you want this fight. You don't want this fight. And to walk away from it. And like I said, it took some therapy. It took journaling. It took my friends, my support network around me, to help me to reframe my thinking. In those movies, here's a good way to kind of like explain this, right? In those movies when a character like freaks out and their two friends physically have to hold them away from something, like literally hold them back from something. When I first met this circle of friends, that's kind of what my brain had to do to me. It had to like hold me back from saying things because I was still, in a space of hurt, in a space of people are backing me against the wall. But this time it wasn't bullies. It was people that I had surrounded myself with that I thought were my friends. And the more I talked to my circle of friends that I have now, the more I felt them holding me back from unleashing on the people that I wanted to. And this thought process of, it's okay to be mad, but you don't have to go this route, was something that I learned how to do with therapy and writing and the help of my friends. But it was not a solid path. There were times that I really had to sit and journal and really dig deep and think about the decisions that I was making. Because, again, in those moments of feeling like you're backed against the wall, you go back to your coping mechanism. You go back to your defense mechanism. All is to say, healing is not linear. It's not. Healing is ugly and scary and messy, and sometimes you're going to backslide, and sometimes you're going to need your friend to hold your hand and say, that wasn't cool. I understand where it came from, but that wasn't cool. Now you have to go fix it and own your own damn actions. That part is hard too. I've said some things like lightly, like I would never decimate any of my people around me or any of my friends ever. But there have been times that I've said something like one off or something like that, and I immediately apologize and I go, I'm sorry. Those are the words that I use, but it's not what I meant to say. Let me try again. And then I'll repeat what I was trying to say in the way that I wanted to, instead of the hurtful way that it might have come out. But it took a while to get there. And it took patience, and it took time, and it took sitting in my therapist's office and being very angry and allowing my inner punk to come out. Not against my therapist, but allowing the inner punk to say what she needed to say in order to get through what she was saying. And all this to say, it's not linear, and it hurts, and it's ugly, and it's messy, and it's hurtful. But if you have the right people around you and you understand that it's not linear and that it's a process, and you give yourself compassion and you give yourself grace and time and patience, then you can work through whatever your inner punk is. Mine just happens to be a very real voice that I used to use to hurt people on purpose. Your inner punk could be something completely different. Or you might have a different name for it. Just know that that part of you is always going to be with you to some extent, and you have to learn to live with that part of you. Okay? But you can also learn how to control that part of you so that it doesn't control you. Make sense? I hope that makes sense. But I hope that this was helpful. This is something that's been on my mind at least the past couple of days as I've kind of watched some things unfold in my life. And that, the anger is there and I'm working through it and I'm talking about it in a healthy way. That way my inner punk doesn't have a chance to come out. Because boy howdy, did she want to come out and fight a couple days ago. Boy howdy, did I really have to sit her down and give her a cookie and explain to her why she couldn't. Oh boy. And, I can sit here and joke about my inner punk because it literally feels like a completely different part of me sometimes. But at the same time, I understand how hurtful she can be. And I understand the very seriousness of me having to keep her at bay. And it's something that I work through every day. And then more when I'm in certain situations or see certain situations. So take that for whatever you will. But guys, if you enjoyed the episode, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, leave comments, find me on TikTok, find me on Insta. And again, thank you so much for your patience last week as I navigated some inner dialogue and a wave that came crashing down on me like a ton of bricks. And hopefully we'll keep going regularly like we have been. But I hope you all have a fabulous day, fabulous week. And until next week, I will talk to you all later. Bye.